You're listening to the Happy Doc Student Podcast, a podcast dedicated to providing clarity to the often mysterious doctoral process. Do you feel like you're losing your mind? Let me and my guests show you how to put more joy in your journey and graduate with your sanity, health, and relationships intact. I'm your host, Dr. Heather Frederick, and today I'll be chatting with Lauren Fonvielle. Lauren is an integrative energy practitioner and coach specializing in EFT for stress, anxiety, and chronic pain. Now, if the acronym EFT is new to you, that stands for Emotional Freedom Technique. It's also known as tapping. And if neither of those are words you've heard before, boy, are you in for a big treat today. She guides her clients on a journey of self-healing to break through obstacles, physical, mental, or emotional, that are keeping them stuck and holding them back in life or business. Just like myself, she is a big believer that we have all the answers we need within, but sometimes we need just a little help accessing them. Lauren, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
And I'm excited for you to share some of your amazing techniques here with the audience today. Why don't we start by you sharing how it was that you discovered EFT?
Yeah. So I was introduced to EFT at a time in my life where I was under an enormous amount of stress and anxiety. I was formerly a corporate marketer, and my family had just moved. I had 2 little children, and we found out that my husband was going to have to deploy. And my stress levels went through the roof. I started having panic attacks, and I knew I needed to find something to help me feel better. And I went on this journey. It started with signing up for yoga teacher training and being around people who were into energy work and finding different ways of feeling better. I also studied Reiki. And then I was in a group coaching program where the coach invited a EFT practitioner in to talk about tapping and do a demo with us. And I was very, very skeptical, this idea of tapping on yourself to feel better. I often describe it as acupuncture without the needles. So instead of putting needles in at certain points, we're applying acupressure on certain points of the body. And it just seemed almost too good to be true. I'm going to tap on myself. I'm going to tap away the anxiety or tap away the, the chronic pain. But then I had an experience with it, and it was a pretty profound experience. And it was enough for me to want to keep studying it and keep practicing it. And ultimately, I went on to get certified so I could share it with other people.
If you've been listening to the Happy Doc Student Podcast for a while, you know that I am really into energy. Everything is energy, and talking about ways to move out energy that's not serving us, move in energy that is serving us. And I'll often say on the show, everything I introduce here on the podcast has science to back it up. But if your cognitive mind is a little skeptical like you were, I always encourage people, well, just try it, have the experience, and see what happens for you. Not everything is for everyone, but I personally have used this technique with my children who had severe, severe anxiety about seeing the dentist. So I was able to experience some really amazing things, especially with children, when they're not, you can't really rationalize with them, but also sometimes talking doesn't do anything for stress and anxiety anyway. It's not a rational feeling. You could be telling yourself, I know I'm in a safe situation. I know my faculty care about me. I know they want me to succeed, and yet I'm still feeling very anxious and stressful. And just knowing that people love and care about you and that you're in a program that's there to support you is often not enough to dissolve those feelings that then hold you back from optimal performance. I love the description about it being like acupuncture. Most people know what that is. Mm-hmm. And so, instead of needles, you're using pressure that you're applying yourself. Why don't we talk about why is this working? How is this working?
Yeah. So the points that we're tapping on are the end points of the meridians, and the meridians are how energy moves through the body, which is commonly talked about in Chinese medicine. And sometimes that energy can get stuck in those meridians and you can tap on them and it helps it to get moving. And then there's been a lot of studies on this, and it has been shown that, and this was a study done by Dr. Peter Stapleton. So it was shown that by tapping on these points, and this was done in a group tapping session. By tapping on these points, it reduces the amount of cortisol that's being sent to the brain. And cortisol is the stress hormone. And so when we're talking about chronic stress and chronic anxiety, that amygdala, which is the part of the brain that controls fight or flight, is constantly going off. It's an alarm that's constantly going off. And when that alarm is going off, then the cortisol starts pumping through the body. And so when we tap on these points, it's telling the amygdala, hey, you don't need to be in fight or flight. It's not necessary right now. And so then the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain that can make the good sound decisions, comes back online, and that reduces the amount of cortisol. So now you can think more clearly. And then when you think more clearly, you feel better and feel calmer, and you can make those better decisions. And so if you take anything away from today, if we walk through the points, it's just finding one of these points that in those moments of feeling that extreme stress or anxiety, you can simply just tap and do some deep breathing, and it's going to help to reduce the amount of cortisol in your body. And that number was up to 43%. It reduces the cortisol by up to 43%. I mean, that's a huge, huge number we're talking about here.
This is a very significant finding. And why I think it's such an important one to share with an audience like this is that even though a lot of people, I would probably even venture to guess most people nowadays are walking around with levels of stress that probably over time aren't serving them, that are having a negative effect on their body, their mind, their relationships, their work. But for this audience in particular, you are being asked to do a task that absolutely requires your prefrontal cortex is online and up to speed and tuned in and ready to go, right? You're being asked to synthesize and analyze high-level research and create a novel product. So when your amygdala is the one running the show, it's absolutely stopping you from getting to your goal. So you mentioned, hey, let's tap through some points. Mm-hmm. Now, I hope all my listeners know when a podcast is released at the same time a corresponding YouTube video is, because I have many guests that want to show things or share things, and it's easier to do visually. So at the end of the show, I'm also going to make sure you have a link where Lauren has so generously offered a 1-hour masterclass where she can really walk you through what this is, the science, and how to do it. And you can do it with her on this video. But for today, I think it would be great fun if you walked us through some points. And like you said, as people are doing this, notice, is there one point that's kind of sticking out for you? And that could be your go-to point that you could go to in an immediate time of stress, right? You're getting this email or you're about to defend. Maybe you don't have time to go through all the points.
Let's do it. And you might also want to pay attention to, are these points that I am naturally touching during the day too? Because our bodies are so innately wise. And sometimes we're doing things, to help ourselves that we don't even realize cognitively that we're doing, right? Okay. So the first point is on the pinky side of the hand. Now you can tap, I'm tapping with my right hand on the pinky side of my left hand, but if you're a lefty and you want to tap with your left hand on the pinky side of your right hand, you can do that as well. There's no wrong way of tapping. So that's the first point. And then we move to the next point, which is right at the crown of the head, the center of the head. I like to tap with an open palm, but many people like to tap with the fingertips. So you can tap with one hand or you can tap with two hands right at the crown of the head. I'll often say when you're taking your kids to the doctor and they bring that stick down to see how tall they are, right where it hits them on the top of the head. Then we're going to move to the start of the eyebrows, the inside of the eyebrows. And again, you can be tapping with just one hand. I'm using my index finger and my middle finger. I'm doing it on both sides, but you can just do one side and then move to the other. There's no wrong way of doing this. And sometimes people will ask, well, how many times do you tap on each point? Again, it's what feels good to you. Sometimes certain points will really feel good and you want to linger there a little bit longer, and that's absolutely okay. Then we're going to move to the sides of the eyes. So this is a common point that people will naturally touch during the day. If you're maybe at your desk, you're overwhelmed, you come and you rub your temples. I'll also say this too, that if you're tapping on these points is bothersome for whatever reason, I've worked with a lot of patients or clients that have had fibromyalgia, and the act of tapping can be bothersome. So if tapping is bothersome, you can always just hold gentle pressure on the point. Always another option. Then we're going to go under the eye. So just gently under the eye. Again, this can be a point that is sensitive for some people if you're somebody that is dealing with sinus issues, perhaps. And you can always skip any point. Under the nose, where the nose and the lip meet at that 90-degree angle. And then we're going to go to the chin point. So that's between the bottom lip and the tip of the chin, on the crease of the chin. And then we're going to move to the collarbone. So we come from the center down about an inch and then over about an inch, inch and a half. So you're really on the fleshy part on either side underneath the collarbone. So I'm tapping with two hands, one on each side. The other option is to bring one hand to the center of the chest, really bringing the index finger and the thumb as far apart as possible. And then you can tap with just one hand, getting both of the points. And now, again, this is often a common point, right? If you see something and you're surprised and you're like, and you put your hand to your chest, you're naturally putting some pressure on these points. Then we're going to move to underneath the arm. So for women, it's about the center of the bra strap. And for men, it's about 2 inches down from the armpit. And then the last point is on the back of the hand, again, on either hand, between the pinky and the ring finger. And you can hold your hand out in front of you, or you can bring that hand that you're tapping on to your chest. Sometimes I find that to be more grounding and calming, having the hand resting on my chest. And that's it. Those are all the main points of the protocol. But I do like to share some additional points. Just like how we talked about, this is similar or comparable to acupuncture. When you go to an acupuncturist, they put needles in at all different points all over your body. So there are additional points. However, with tapping, the ones that we just tapped on are the main points of the protocol. But sometimes when you are in a stressful situation and you're out in public and you don't want to be tapping on the top of your head and having people, giving you a funny look like, what is she doing? You can do something a little bit more discreet. So you can come to the bed of the nail on every single nail and just squeeze on either side on the bed of the nail and just taking some deep breaths. And again, squeezing or tapping on any of these points is sending that message to the amygdala, letting the amygdala know you do not need to be in fight or flight, reducing the cortisol, calming the body. I mean, this is really a practice that helps you to regulate the nervous system and feel better in your body. What I like to say is coming home to yourself and getting that stuck energy moving. And one of the other things that I wanted to say about that is that, as humans, we have all of these experiences in our lives, and these experiences have emotions attached to them. And when those emotions are intense emotions or, the emotions that we don't enjoy feeling, like frustration, anger, sadness, overwhelm, anxiety, we oftentimes will push it down, stuff it down, and then redirect our attention to something else that's going to distract us. And that can work for the short term, but that in the long term, I think we all know all that stuff we've been stuffing down gets to a point where it's going to explode, right? And when we're talking about stress and anxiety, sometimes when it gets to that point of where it's got to come out in some way, sometimes that's, taking it out on a loved one and verbally saying something that maybe they didn't deserve. And other times it can come out physically, right? When we're talking about stress and physically how you feel in your body, lots of people can recognize, oh yeah, when I'm stressed out, I get pain in my neck and my shoulders feel really tense. But it's not just with stress. It's with any type of emotion that we can hold on to it in our body, because the definition of emotion is energy in motion. It's this idea that our energy wants to move. It does not want to be stuffed down. It does not want to be, suppressed. We need to acknowledge it. We need to feel it and move through it. So we're not constantly running from it. And this is a practice that can really help with that.
Lauren, I am a big fan of physical techniques. I love bringing the body in. I love your statement, coming home, coming back into your body, being aware of where you are. As we were tapping, I noticed the top of my head felt really, really good. I had never thought about thinking of these as individual points, right? But I really loved too this pressing of the fingers, because you really could do that anywhere and it's silent. I share also a lot of techniques that use the voice. So to have a technique that you could do while you were in a seminar or on a Zoom call unmuted when something is being discussed that's causing you anxiety, I think is a great tool to have in your toolbox. Now, one question I thought, if someone had never heard of this before, they might be wondering, do you have to tap at a certain pressure? Like, does it have to be hard?
Right. No, it does not. And that is a common question. So I often describe it as like if you're tapping somebody on the shoulder to get their attention, just gently. You don't want to be tapping to a point of hurting yourself or that it's bothering you. It should be just very gentle.
And now there's also another layer that we add on to this with statements, right? So I felt definitely a physiological response in my body of calmness after just tapping with no statements. Do the statements, let's talk about what these statements are, but do they kind of like turn up the volume, would you say, on how effective this is?
Yeah. It helps you to really hone in on what's going on, to really get to the root of what's truly bothering you, right? Because when we're talking about stress and anxiety and that thing that pushes you over the edge, like somebody says something to you and you just get so angry and then explode, right? You're not exploding because they said that thing. You're exploding because of all these other things that are beneath the surface. And so what we do with the words is we really tune in to the negative. And sometimes people will say, well, are we tapping in the bad stuff then? Like if we're saying these negative phrases, like it feels like I'm tapping in the bad stuff, kind of like the opposite of a positive affirmation. But what it is doing, right? It's a lot different than, because some people would say, okay, let's recognize that I'm feeling really angry right now. And now let's switch it all the way to the other end of the spectrum and say a positive affirmation like, I am happy-go-lucky. I don't know, right? But if you're saying that positive affirmation, you're not really feeling it. If you're still feeling angry, but you're saying, I'm happy-go-lucky, it's like there's a disconnect there, right? So tapping helps you to really acknowledge how you're feeling, really tune into how you're feeling. And maybe there's something, that you are really passionately angry about, and it's not logical or possible to even get to that I'm happy-go-lucky within the same day, right? But what you can do is I'm really angry. I've been angry before. I've gotten through it. I'm angry and it's okay. You can slowly move the needle towards those better feelings or thoughts. And so we create sentences based on how you're feeling and what's going on for you. And then as we use those sentences, we tap on the points and you're tuning into your body. So you notice when you're saying those things, am I feeling something physical? Are other thoughts coming to mind? And a lot of the time when we do this, the other thoughts start to come up, memories can come up, other beliefs that you might have could come up. And then we use that to create a new sentence, a new set of words that we use when we tap. And so it's really this process of, following the breadcrumbs, seeing what thoughts come up, what physical sensations come up, and using that to direct where the session goes and uncover what's going on. And doing so is going to help you peel back those layers to really get to the root of what is truly going on, what is really causing this stress and anxiety.
And that is such an important point because I've had many people say, Heather, I've tried those positive affirmations and they don't work. And I think the reason, if someone's had that experience, is exactly what you said. When you are physically embodying a certain emotion like anger, you can't just tell yourself, I am happy.
Right.
Your conscious, your other than conscious, your subconscious mind is not there, right? You physically need to move this energy out to make room for feeling happy. So this idea of processing, of acknowledging these, maybe I like to call them uncomfortable emotions versus saying a negative or positive. Usually it's an uncomfortable emotion. If you feel kind of yucky, you go, I'm not really feeling, I don't like feeling this way when I get an email from my chair or when I open up my document and it's full of track changes, it's causing me to feel uncomfortable. How do I move that through? Could you give a sample of a statement that someone might start with and how that would morph through the tapping to something more positive or more comfortable?
Yeah, sure. So the way that you do what we call the setup phrase, and you do the setup phrase on the pinky side of the hand where we started. And so it goes like this: even though I'm feeling blank, I love and accept myself. That is the generic statement. Some people struggle with saying I love and accept myself. So we can do what's called flexing the statement and say, even though I'm feeling really stressed out, that's just how it is right now. Or even though I'm feeling really stressed right now, I'm honoring how I feel, right? So you can change that second half of the sentence so that it feels true to you. That's an important point with the tapping. And so there's lots of tapping videos that are available out there. And I think that they're wonderful. I make lots of tapping videos so people can tap along with me too. But I always like to remind people that if the words that the practitioner is using in the video don't align with what you are feeling, you need to change the words to make them feel right for you, because that's how you're really going to begin to move the needle and create that change within. Okay. So we could say something like, even though I'm feeling really stressed out, I love and accept myself. Even though I'm really stressed about this project and I'm feeling nervous, that's just how it is right now. Even though I'm stressed and I feel it in my neck and my shoulders, I'm acknowledging how I feel. You would say the sentence or a version of that sentence 3 times on the pinky side of the hand. And then we do what's called a reminder phrase. And we move to the top of the head and we would say, I'm so stressed. And you can just keep it very simple, whatever the emotion is, coming to the eyebrows. I'm so stressed. And now it's also very helpful to repeat this out loud, to be saying it verbally out loud as opposed to just, repeating it in your head, because it can be a very powerful process to say it out loud. Because a lot of the time, the thoughts that we're thinking on repeat in our head, we're not saying to anybody. And so something that can feel really true when you are starting you can start to feel this distance from it or feel confused about something that felt really true. So for example, going with that, what you said, getting a document back with all the track changes and you're like, oh, like this feeling of like, I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough to do this. I don't feel good enough, and you can say that. And when you're saying that out loud, as opposed to just thinking it, and then you can start to be like, oh, that's ridiculous. Like I'm in this program. Of course I'm good enough. You start to create that distance and create those shifts. So you begin to think about something differently. And when you think about it differently, you feel differently. And when you feel differently, you act differently. And when you act differently, you get those different results. So yeah, that's kind of how it works. But you just notice the thoughts that are coming up and you can change what you're saying. So if you're going from feeling anxious to then feeling like I'm not good enough, you can change the words that you're using mid round, what we call a round of tapping. You don't have to wait till you get all the way through to change the words. You can change the words as it feels right to you.
I think this is a great technique. If there's any listeners out there who have been wanting to try meditation, or maybe you've tried meditating, and I have a lot of people say to me, I'm bad at that, or I'm not good at that, or I don't enjoy that. One of the reasons for my personality type that I enjoy an activity like this is because you're actually giving a voice to your thoughts. You're not trying to calm your mind. You're letting your mind go. You're like, let's hear it. Mm-hmm. Let's deal with it. You're not trying to go to this contrived place of a state of calm by just, okay, I'm going to put my thought on a leaf and let it float away. If that works for you, awesome. Put your thought on a leaf and let it float down the river. But a lot of the people that I come into contact with, something like this, where it's very somatic, it's physical, you're using your voice, you're letting your brain go, really gives them the opportunity, because sometimes it's just a few minutes that we need to pause and find that space. And then come to the end, like you said, you get through this round of tapping, which should take how long in general, would you say?
One round of tapping won't take long. It could take anywhere from 30 seconds to a minute or 2 minutes, something like that, depending on, how long your phrases are and how long you decide to stay on each point, whatever feels best for you. Typically, when I do one-on-one sessions, we have a session for an hour, and people were like, an hour, like that seems like a long time, but it really is just like an organic unfolding, and one thing really does lead to the next. But if you're doing this by yourself, you don't have to do it for an hour. You could do it just for a couple of minutes until you begin to notice a shift. And sometimes that shift can happen after one round, and sometimes it takes a few. And the other thing I'll say is that if you're trying this and you notice like the intensity perhaps of your anxiety has heightened after one round of tapping, know that that's normal. That can happen, right? Because when we're bringing our attention to something, it can expand. However, that's actually an indicator that tapping is going to work for you. You just need to keep tapping, and then that number is going to come down. And that's another thing that I did mention. So at the beginning of a session, what you do is on a scale of 1 to 10, you would rate how intense is this anxiety for me, or how intense is this sadness or frustration that I'm feeling right now, and you give it a number. And so that as you move through after each round, you can kind of take a deep breath and be like, is that number shifting? Is it going down at all? And it's a really nice way to kind of track your progress, because sometimes if you don't do that, you can have this experience and then be like, oh, it wasn't that bad to begin with, right? Like you don't really acknowledge how the tool has helped you. And so this is a nice way to really just be mindful of that.
I love that suggestion of getting a baseline, right? I'm at a 10, and then you go through, okay, I'm at a 6. Okay, I'm at a 5. Okay, I'm at a 3. Okay, 3 is good. I can function now. I'm going with a 3. And this idea of an hour, it's so flexible. I love when things are flexible, and it's really acknowledges that everyone has a unique journey, that they're at a unique point, not just in their life, but in that part of their day. You may do one round in the morning, but in the middle of the day need 3, or that evening, an hour is what is calling to you. And I envision it when you were talking as layers of an onion coming off. Or maybe the difference between just straightening up your house. Like I've tapped enough to someone can come over and I'm not going to be embarrassed, to deep cleaning. Like that hour is the deep clean. Like you're getting down in the baseboard and you're finding lost socks underneath the bed that you didn't know were there, right? There's a difference. They're both useful at different times, right? And it's kind of what you need at that moment and what you've got time for at that moment. And also I would say what you're willing to face at that moment. Right. Maybe there's so much going on that kind of doing a deep dive in things might not be a good time for that. You might want to save that for the weekend, right?
I think what I love so much about this tool is that it can be used proactively on the day-to-day if you're just doing it for 5 minutes here and there. And then it can be used reactively in those moments where you're really having the stress, or you can feel the panic start to come up. And it can be used in both ways. And I will say, I will always recommend to be doing it more on a proactive basis to then be ready and prepared to use it when you need to in those reactive situations.
So another tool, listeners, that you can add to your toolbox, something that you might want to explore doing before you start your day. Start your day out this way, maybe end your day this way. I have a lot of people that say they have trouble sleeping. This would be a great technique to really calm. It's resetting the nervous system. It's telling your amygdala, it's okay, we got this. Things are safe, right? So that you can get that restorative sleep. I mentioned earlier, I'm going to have all the ways that people can connect with you, Lauren, in the show notes, as well as your masterclass. But before we wrap up this episode, do you have a favorite quote or some final words of wisdom you want to share?
I think one of my favorites is that the answers all lie within. The answers really are all within. We know what we need, and sometimes we need a little help accessing those answers. And there's a variety of different healing modalities that are out there that can help you. Just like you said, it's all about exploring and figuring out what modality is going to resonate most with you. I like to think that the universe sends us messages, or what I call little like soul nudges. And sometimes that shows up as something that you're reading about in a book. So like you read something about tapping in a book, or then you see a documentary where they have it and you're like, oh, maybe I should check that out. But then you still don't do it. And then you hear a friend talk about it, right? And so when that type of thing starts happening, regardless of whatever the modality is, give yourself the gift of exploring what that is, because there's a reason why it's showing up, and it's showing up for you to explore it, not ignore it, and give yourself that gift.
Yes, listener, you are listening and here with this podcast right here, right now for a reason. So I encourage you to check this out. And Lauren, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This was wonderful.
Thanks so much for listening, and I look forward to connecting with you on the next episode. Until then, if you're looking for more ways to invite joy into your journey, check out the free resources at expandyourhappy.com. You'll find downloads like an article I wrote titled, The Doctoral Journey, 12 Things You Need to Know That They Probably Won't Tell You. Based on audience request, there is a PDF that organizes all podcasts by the 7 steps detailed in the Happy Doc Student Handbook, which you can also find on the website. And if you're looking for Happy Doc Student swag, I've got that too. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and YouTube channel, and if you want to make my day, rate and review so that together we can change the way graduate education is delivered and experienced. Hey, one more thing. Just a quick reminder that the information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only.